Hello, good morning, and welcome everybody to another session of Horn Camp Connect. We are so happy that you decided to join us today. I am your host with the most, Chris Williams, staff member here at KBHC. This morning, Horn Camp Connect will be led by Jesse McCormick and will feature Katy Ambrose presenting a brief history of horn players of African descent in America. As always, I'm sure you guys are all old hat at this. Just be sure that your names match your actual name so we know who we're talking with. Go ahead and stay muted unless one of us directly asks you to unmute. And the final thing, chats, they can be affected by a drop-down menu. Just be sure that you double check that so you communicate with your intended audience. And I'll go ahead and hand the session off to Jesse. Oh, Jesse, your name is wrong. Hello, Bernard.
Yes, I was about to say, good morning. I'm not Jesse, I'm Bernard. No, so I'm sure that will change quickly. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us again. Glad to have you here for day 3 of our Horn Camp Connect warm-up live from KBHC 2022. With that, we can get started right away with our stretching. So let's all stand up. Very good. So, and take all the gear out of my pockets this time. It's a little more comfortable that way. All right, so we're gonna do our twisting reps, 10, all right, 10 twists. 1 to each side is 1 rep. Okay, here we go, 10 twists. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Awesome. All right, our foldovers, 10 counts. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Roll up slowly. Excellent. We have side bends, all right? I'm gonna do Bernard's version this time. I'm gonna pull on the arm in the direction that we're gonna lean. Okay, let's go this way, 10 counts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Other side, 10 counts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. All right. Arm rotations, we're going to do 10 backwards all the way around. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And 10 forward. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Shoulder shrugs, 10 backward first. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 forward. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, shake it out a little bit. Okay, shoulder shrugs. That was my favorite this morning. I really needed that one. I think it's from these White Mountain School beds. They're in great shape. Here we go. We're going to move right into breathing. Okay, so we're going to do our 3 in, 6 out, and then continue with 4, 8, 5, 10, 6, 12. And then we're going to start a new pattern after that, which we'll take a little break and talk about. So 3 in, you can use the hand technique to remind yourself about getting a nice open throat, open mouth, air really deep. Okay, 3 in, 3 for nothing. 1, ready, go. 6 out. 4 in, 8 out, 3 for nothing. 1, ready, go. 8 out. 5 in, 10 out, 3 for nothing. 1, ready, go. 10 out. Good. Last one, 6 in, 12 out, 3 for nothing. 1, ready, go. 12 out. Good. Nice deep breath in and out. Okay, so we're adding some for today. This is going to be 3 in, 15 out. So we've got to pace our exhalation over the 15 counts. And we're going to do a quicker breath with 2 in, more pacing out of 18 counts, and then 1 in, 21 out. All right, really control your exhalation over the full count. So we're going from really full to really empty in a nice even manner. So 3 for nothing, we'll do 3:15. 1, ready, go. Good, all right. Quicker inhalation, 2 in, 18 out, 3 for nothing. 1, ready, go. Great. And last one of this exercise round is 1 in, 21 out. 3 for nothing. 1, ready, go. Good. Nice deep breath in and out. All right. Getting our air moving in a nice, comfortable way this morning. Let's do capacity breathing. Bernard should have finished this for you yesterday, so I'm going to just briefly explain it. We inhale all the way, 100% capacity, keep the throat open, 2 sips on top of that. Exhale forcefully all the way till you're convinced that you're empty, and then you're going to hiss until you can no longer hiss, all right? So let's do 3 of these together as a group. All right, here we go, the first one. Get every last drop of air out with that hiss. Really encourage your body to get rid of everything, okay? 2 more of these. All right, second one, here we go. All right, that nice deep breath afterward feels good. Third one, memorizing our true capacity, both full and empty. Last one, here we go. Nice deep breath in and out. All right, that's hard work, but it's worth it. Let's move on to our first notes of the day, and we can sit for this one. Excellent. All right, just gonna adjust this down a bit. Cool. So we're going to start with a free buzz. You can free buzz wherever you're comfortable. Mine is a little higher than Bernard's. And as it sounds, it's working really well today. So let's go ahead and free buzz, a nice, long, easy, long tone free buzz all together. Great. Mine has a bit of a double buzz in it today. So we're going to move right along to our mouthpiece buzzing. Same thing, basic concept of the free buzz, right? We just want it to be air and buzz, feeling really easy. Very simple start for the day. Okay, let's try it on the mouthpiece. Excellent. All right, let's transfer that right into our first notes of the day on the horn. Approaching this from a place of ease, choose either C, E, or G, something in that triad. Okay. Make sure that your note has a nice life to it, very beautiful beginning, middle, and end. All right, flowing right through the horn. No stagnant, no sitting on notes. Here we go, first note on the horn. Good. Hopefully with that nice air that we've built up, you have a lot left, right? A lot to put in and a lot left. Okay, we're gonna move right along into our ho-do-dos. So we're gonna go to about ho-do-do and continue climbing chromatically. Here we go, the first one. Try to stay on the F horn if you can. 1, 2, ready. Continuing on the F horn, A flat. Last one. Very good. Awesome. So the reason why, one of the reasons why, many reasons why that one is great, is because it gets your air in your buzz going first, takes the tongue out of the equation, right? A lot of people get stuck behind the tongue before they start their notes, all right? This one also helps me visualize thinking of my air as being very circular, right? When it comes in, pause for a brief second, and you go right out, right? Imagine tossing a baseball, right? If you throw the baseball up, the ball stops for a split second, and then just very naturally falls back down. If you slow that down, that image down, or you took a video of it, slowed it down, that's how I want you to think of your air. Okay, in and then right back out in a nice, easy, gentle manner. Okay, so we're going to move on to our song of the day, which is different this week from last week. It is called Orphan Child, a Native American Cherokee lullaby. All right, so hopefully you have that in front of you in the week 2 packet. We're going to sing, buzz, and play this one today. So it's going to start on a C. You can sing this on any syllable you want. I'm going to sing it in solfege. So it's going to start here. Do, mi, re, do, fa, mi, re, do, do. All right there. Let's sing it all together as a group. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Do, mi, re, do, fa, mi, re, do, do. Do, re, re, mi, mi. Do, mi, re, do, fa, mi, re, do, do. Do, re, do, mi, re, do, do. Great, excellent. So you're getting to hear me sing these songs of the day much more than usual. Usually that's Bernard's job, and then my job is to make fun of him for it. So sorry I'm not here tomorrow to do that. Okay, so let's buzz it on the mouthpiece. Nice and easy. You can slur all of this if you want, or use your nice light articulation that we did in Ho Do Do. So here we go. 1, 2, 3. Very good. Okay, so let's transfer all of that to the horn. I'm really hoping I started on the right pitch. Now I'm not convinced. Okay, close enough. Let's try it on the horn. Here we go. 1, 2. Very good. All right. I've used singing and the human voice as inspiration in my playing for many years. If you think about it, the human voice is something that we're all naturally drawn to, obviously. But also just in music, some of the most beautiful music, I think, written for the human voice. So anything that you could do to bring that quality of sound and spinning the phrase into your own playing, I think just kind of is a very natural way of approaching musicality as a musician and a horn player. All right, let's move right on to Free Buzz Builder. Okay, I'm going to start around G. So what we're doing is adding a third measure past what we did yesterday. So then we do that from the flat. So where did I say? Ooh, it's a terrible condition today. Okay, let's do this all together. 2, 3, 4. our mouthpiece sirens. Starting from C, Do, that's our starting note. We're gonna go up 1 octave really slowly, really tank up for this one, and blow all the way through the entire gliss, top to bottom, okay? Starting here as a group, first mouthpiece siren. Good. This is really great for pacing our air all the way up, blowing through the gliss, right? Okay, and right back down. We're gonna start now on G. G, here, okay? A little lower mouthpiece siren. For me, this one's a little more challenging. Takes more grip of the embouchure. Starting on G, big breath, here we go. Excellent. And adding to yesterday, we're going to start an octave above where we just started. G, here, and we're going to go up an octave. All right, upper siren, big breath, here we go. Excellent. So this glissing quality and the air behind it is really great for getting into our harmonic series. So the 2 ways that you can do this is you can slide through your notes with the air like we just did in the mouthpiece sirens. Okay, you can hear that they're kind of bending and sliding into one another. Or you can notch them and aim for them using your ear. You can use whichever technique you like. We're going to go up to the G and then down to a low C in our harmonic series today, extending it. We're going to continue all the way down to the F sharp harmonic. Okay, so let's give this a shot. Actually, I'll demonstrate once. As a group. Try to do it all in one breath. First harmonic, here we go. Right, on the E horn, second valve. Here we go. E flat horn, first valve. D horn. D flat horn. C horn. Last one, B horn, all 1, 2, and 3. let's go up in eighth notes a little faster. And all the way through, all the way back up to our open F harmonic, okay? So here we go. 1, 2, ready. One and three combination. D flat horn. D horn. E flat horn. E horn. Last one, F horn. Good. Now, if you wanted to keep going, you could, switching to the B flat horn using the thumb valve, okay? Going to thumb 2 and 3. So if you want to keep going on the harmonic series, you can really get up into the stratosphere as we progress on these harmonic series throughout the week. Okay, lip trill builder. I will demonstrate this for you because now we're on day 3 and we're getting to the advanced portion of building lip trills. Rule number 1 being never play them faster than you can control them, otherwise you're just reinforcing uneven lip trills. So I'll give an example of what we're gonna, how you progress on this from what we built yesterday. Here we go. So it's going to sound like this. You can perform that on whichever speed you like. Just make sure that you can control it. Yesterday in the live class, I was talking about how I actually like to do this in major thirds because I think finding that spot where the note flips to the next one is what we're really trying to learn. So I do it in thirds. And the first time you try it, it feels a little bit strange and takes some getting used to. But if you can do this all over the range, you know, a whole step trill really doesn't feel that far away at all. Yeah, good. Okay, so beautiful sounds. The last 2 days we've been starting on C because that's a bit more of a comfortable place to start when you start learning the beautiful sounds. We're going to jump down now and start on G. That's a more logical place to start as we spread into the extremes of the ranges of the horn. So we're going to go quite a ways on this one today and really get those beautiful sounds warmed up. Try to do it all in one breath and think of using your air and your phrasing throughout as this one nice long arc and really spin on the whole notes, okay? Keeping those notes alive like I was talking about earlier. We're going to start on a G. I think that's a G. Pretty close, all right. My pitch recognition is flat today. All right, so we're going to start on G, and I will pause for page turns and to empty the water. Here we go. Well, right here, hold the other, 2, or scrolling down if you're using a digital PDF. All right, quick empty, and we'll keep going on B flat. Here we go. 1, 2, ready. B, 2, ready. C, 2, ready. D flat. Ready. Octave down. Ready. D, 2, ready. Low C. Good. Page turn. All right, one more page of these. Go ahead and empty real quick. Okay, continuing on E flat below the staff. Here we go as a group. It's E flat, I believe. Yep. Here we go. 1, 2, ready. Low B. Ready. sharps. Here we go. Last one, pedal A flat. Whew, very good. Are you still maintaining all one breath? Takes a lot of air there at the end. Very good. So if we would have continued, we would have been on G, right? G in the staff and pedal G, an octave above and an octave below where we would have started. Yeah, so we'll continue building that in the days to come. And I see there's a question in the chat. So I think it says, he plays both high and low notes. How do you keep your embouchure in that full range shape? So that's a good question. Part of it is just that, you know, I've been playing a long time and I play almost every day, and I've built these into my warm-up, so I've gradually extended my range over the years. But I did learn a scale exercise here at Horn Camp, actually, from Jim Thatcher, and I believe he called them circular scales, and at least that's what I call them. And it's this idea of extending the range through doing scale passages just down and up, right? So maybe you start with an octave. We'll do it on the E flat horn. So that's a very basic example of it. So I would extend it then. Okay, so I'm staying pretty even as I dip down and I go back up, and I breathe wherever I need to in the middle. I just let everything stop. Pretty soon you can build that into a 3-octave scale passage. And so on and so forth. And I keep going circular all the way down, all the way up in a relaxed manner, blowing through my notes rather than at them. And I would do that in multiple keys for a couple minutes every day. That really helped me to get an evenness throughout the ranges. And also I'd done a lot of break work in the low range. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, Lupe. Okay, let's move on to our articulated chromatic scales. We're going to now start on G, going up 2 octaves. We're going to do this all on the F horn, and then we're going to do it all on the B flat horn. So making sure that we're keeping both sides of the horn fingerings really under our fingers. So we're going to start on G, I believe. Sweet. Okay. Dun, 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 dun. About that speed. Okay. So articulated with a nice ta, do, da, whatever is comfortable for you. Let's try this together. All on the F horn, all the way up to the upper G. 1, 2, 3. Mostly made it unscathed. Now on the B flat horn, starting thumb 1 and 2. Okay. All articulated. Here we go as a group. 1, 2, 3. that one tends to stress me out the most of anything, just because I feel like if I get one finger off, I'm going to stay one finger off the whole time. So it's a good one to work into your daily regimen. Let's do our articulated major scales and arpeggios. Starting on C, we're going to go through the circle of fifths. Today we're in triplets. For our scales and arpeggios, it's going to sound like this. Nice and easy, beautiful scales. All right, let's do it as a group. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. G. E. A. E. B. F sharp. Stop for a page turn. All right, going into the world of flats, starting with D flat. Here we go. 2, ready. A flat. E flat. B flat. Last one on F. Awesome, made it through all of our scales today on triplets. Very good. So that brings us through the day 3 warm-up. We have a few minutes left, so we can talk about any subjects that you like if you have questions. So in terms of a warm-up, you know, especially when I think about like the day 6, the most advanced packet, it's more than a warm-up really, right? I mean, we could more or less say that we're warmed up in the first 15 minutes that we've done our playing. Of course, we start with stretches and breathing, but after that, after about 15 minutes of playing, I'd say that we're pretty much warmed up. So I look at the full warm-up exercise and warm-up packet more as like an exercise regimen, right? So we all have days where we can't play that much, right? Especially if you're not a professional horn player, you have to work in horn playing when you can get to it, either early morning before you leave for work or in the afternoon when you get home from work. And you just don't have that much time to devote to practicing. If you do a full warm-up and workout regimen like this, it can do a lot for at least maintaining, if not building, your endurance. And so I notice when I have several days in a row, like I really can't do that much practicing and playing, but I need to stay in shape because we have Mahler Symphony next week. I can run through this full routine, and I feel like it at least keeps me, steady and stable in terms of my endurance for a couple of days. So definitely recommend doing a warm-up and endurance training exercise every day. So, doesn't look like we have any questions in the chat.
No, it does not. But I was thinking of a question. You mentioned you had these circular scales. Are there any other sort of exercises that you find yourself coming back to besides the material presented here?
Exercises that I come back to. Yeah, there's a more advanced exercise that I do fairly regularly that isn't in any of these packets actually, and it is based on the harmonic series. But it starts, I do it after I do my harmonic series exercises, and it starts on the open C. And it's about learning leaps on the horn, right, descending. And so the pattern is so I do that on all of the fingering combinations. So I descend all the way in the F horn. All the way down. Right on the F horn. Then I switch to the B flat horn and keep going. So, as you can see with the big leaps, it takes a lot of embouchure control, kind of what Lupe was referring to earlier. So that's why it's not part of this packet, because it's a bit more of an advanced exercise. After I do it in the 2 pattern, which is I do it in the 3 pattern starting on E. Then after I get all the way through the series there, I do it on G. As you can see, I'm being really accurate with it today. This is great. The last one is the hardest one of them all. So it starts on G. So I do, let's see, G, E, G, C, G, 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 C. I can't even say my note names right, but I'll demonstrate it once. Okay. And I go a little faster than that. So, and the goal is to obviously hit every note, right, which I'm not doing. But if you don't do that, it's also just good for leap control. And as a second horn player, I feel like it's especially valuable. So when I'm really paying attention and I've paced it correctly, yeah.
Yeah, I can see that being super helpful for things like the Beethoven 9, the fast movement. Beep, bop, beep, bop, beep, bop, beep, bop.
Yes.
I can see that being super useful for that kind of exercise. Anybody else have any questions in the chat? Anything at all? He's right here waiting. That sounds like a great exercise for large leaps in music. Yeah, I would say so.
Exactly right. And then there's another one that's similarly based on the harmonic series, and I'm pretty sure that it's a Freudist exercise. And I'm hesitant to demonstrate it because I haven't done it in a while, but it sounds really, really cool. So you start with open F horn harmonic, and you alternate every other pattern between open F and thumb 2 and 3. You guys know what I'm talking about? Okay, so I'm gonna attempt to demonstrate it, and hopefully I can do it somewhat accurately so you get an idea of what it sounds like. Woo, made it.
That was really good.
Thank you. So then you can descend a half step, so you do it alternating between second valve and open. And descending. So it's also an extended abilities exercise, but when you do it every day, it's actually really fun, just harmonically entertaining for the ear. So.
Yeah, I like that exercise a lot. Yeah, that one is Freudis in her book, Playing the Horn Well.
Thoughts on playing the horn well?
Thoughts on Playing the Horn Well. Thank you, Kyle. Yeah, they're called horn flexies. They're super fun. I think I've also heard Tom Bacon call them boodly because it kind of sounds like boodly, boodly.
I like that name.
Yeah, there's a lot of beach exercises that are very similar to this. What other questions? Any other thoughts on playing the horn well, Jesse?
No, not really. I also do, what is it, the Clark studies?
Oh, the Clark studies are good. The trumpet stuff, yeah.
That's also part of my daily routine that is not included in this packet. And I do that along with the scales. I do it in a circle of fifths, you know. They're really good for, again, just like finger dexterity, getting through all the keys. F sharp and D flat are usually the worst ones. So a lot of third fingers back and forth between 1 and 3 in that one.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So
I also found that particular Clark study helped me in sort of that muddy range, right, where everyone's break sits. I slid it way down and practiced it articulated and slurred, and it really helped me kind of even out that, fifth of the range where we all struggle to play accurately.
Yeah,
it's a good sound.
That's really true. Yeah, it would be really good for break studies. For working over my break, I worked a lot with scales. My break was always between those two notes. So everything above I would play in my high setting, right, and everything below that had to be in the low setting. So I would stay in my high setting and descend below my break, and it got really it would be really uncomfortable, as I recall. Your lip is saying, "Oh, I don't like this. We need to change. We need to go into our low setting," right? So I would work down below my break in my high setting, not allowing my lip to change into the low setting. Then I would start in my low setting and work up above my break, right? Same thing, my lip is saying, I really need to change, I don't like this is uncomfortable, and you'll hear it, it'll be like an airy, fuzzy sound. And you go back down. So what you end up with is you're pushing your high setting and your low setting. If normally your break is here between G and A flat, what you can do is create a little bit of a range where you can play, G, F sharp, A flat, maybe F natural, and A natural on either setting, right? you keep extending across your break in that manner, right, what you end up with is an entire range or an octave of notes that you can do in either setting. What eventually happened to me as I kept doing this, and I used my circular scales pattern from before, is that I ended up with no break. I don't really know where my break is. You'll see when I move up from the lower register to the upper register, you'll see my jaw move, right? But I don't really feel it that way. It just is all kind of incorporated into one setting, or at least it feels like one setting, even though I know it's not. But my break has kind of disappeared. So, and that's fine with me. It doesn't ever need to come back. So yeah, I was lucky that I only had one break. You know, some people have many breaks, all over the range. That's how I recommend as well.
Yeah, we had one last question before we switch over to Katie. I think we have time for one more.
Yeah.
Lupe had asked, how do you find your break? I think that one's in.
Oh, okay. I guess the best way to define finding your break, since I lost mine a long time ago, I don't really want to find it, but you'll notice that, you know, as I was doing chromatically, right? As you descend, you'll find what should be apparent is that there will be a spot where your embouchure is basically saying, I need to reset, or I need to change something. Maybe I need to roll the lower lip in, or I need to like almost pull the horn off your face and reset to go below that. Okay, and then likewise, same thing. If you're noodling around down the low range and you ascend, and all of a sudden you feel the sensation of, oh, I need to reset, I need to move something, or like take the horn off my face and place it in a different spot. That's the best that I could recommend for finding your break. It'll feel like you need two different settings for the two different ranges.
Cool. Thank you for your answer, Jesse. Thank you for your time. I see there's one more question for Suzanne. Perhaps Jesse will be kind enough stick around and maybe type out an answer while Katie goes ahead and gets set up. Thank you so much for your time, Jesse.
Yep. Thanks for joining me this morning, and I'll see you guys day after tomorrow.
Oh, it looks like Jesse had muted his mic, which I was using because it's much better than mine. I was saying thank you so much for joining us, everybody. And that I find myself gaining a lot of value from these exercises. I think sometimes we picture certain things to be too simple to have use, perhaps. But you would be really surprised how much you can learn from the simplest of exercises. Even just as Jesse was demonstrating, just a simple chromatic scale can really show a lot in your work. Hold on for me 1 second, guys, while Katie gets that.
Hi, good morning. I'm Katy Ambrose. I'm delighted to be hopping in for week 2. I'm subbing for the incredible, inimitable Sadie Glass as the natural horn specialist. I'm a very proud KBHC alum. I was here in 1999, 2000, and 2001. And now I teach at the University of Iowa and I inherited that studio from another proud KBHC faculty alum, Jeff Agrell. My lecture today is about how horn players of African descent fit into the history of our instrument, specifically in the United States. You might have seen my video on the International Horn Society social media channels a year ago about William Lee and the Rodenbostel horn at George Washington's Mount Vernon, or my online presentation at IHS 2021. So some of this might be familiar to you. I'm currently working on editing my manuscript of a book about this research, so it's ongoing education. Please reach out to me if there's anyone that you think should be included. My email is Katy, Katy-Ambrose, A-M-B-R-O-S-E, @uiowa.edu. Okay, give it a sightline. So the horn, as we know and love it today, descended from the French cor de chasse, which is the horn of the hunt. The cor de chasse was all the rage in the court of Louis XIV, and in 1681, Count Franz Anton von Spork of Bohemia paid a visit to Versailles and is said to have fallen in love with the sound and spectacle of the horn during this visit. He left two of his servants, Peter Rolling and Wenzel Sveda, and I say servants, we're going to get back to that idea, at Versailles to learn how to play the instrument, and they in turn brought their newly acquired knowledge to Bohemia, and then it dissipated throughout Europe. Rolling and Sveda, taught other servants how to play the cor de chasse, play the instrument. So the sport of the hunt, along with the practice of blowing the horn, was brought to the American colonies with the European aristocracy and the sons of European aristocracy who settled here at some point before 1747. The 6th Lord Fairfax established hunting parties in Virginia, and we can see this here. George William Fairfax, who's the son of the 6th Lord Fairfax, was great friends with George Washington, and this is a depiction of their hunting party. Okay. So in Virginia, both George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, along with other so-called founding fathers, they engaged regularly in the hunt, the sport of the hunt. Both of these men, both of these men were trying to create this American equivalent of aristocracy. And one of the ways that they sought to do so was by sponsoring these hunting parties. Jefferson had attempted to procure horn-playing servants from Monticello as part of a band of harmony music. That never materialized, but we do know that George Washington had at least one enslaved hunting horn player at Mount Vernon. And the difference being enslaved people in the colonies, indentured servants in Europe. Both men were emulating or attempting to emulate these European practices, but by the late 18th century, indentures were much less common in the colonies, and full-blown enslavement was the norm. This here is one of the earliest depictions of a brass player of color, which shows John Blank. He was a famous trumpeter in the court of Henry VIII, and this is from the Westminster Tournament Roll of 1511, which is housed in the College of Arms in London. So horn players of color don't start showing up in iconography until the 18th century. This is a very interesting portrait of a servant whose place was so important within the household that he was commissioned a portrait by the family of the estate. It's housed at the Erdig of the National Trust in Wrexham, England. So horn players had been serving dual functions on the field and in the concert hall since the mid-17th century, when opera composers like Lee would write stage parts for horns. By the early 18th century, this dual function was more pronounced as composers began including parts for the horn in the orchestra itself, not just on stage as sound effects. By the time Bach was writing, there were Stegpfeifers or huntsmen who were adept enough on the instrument to play these challenging parts. The bottom left in this painting, we can see Cato. And Cato was one of the finest horn players in London during the early and mid-18th century. He was the huntsman to Frederick, the Prince of Wales, who was the heir apparent to the British throne, and his son, George III, ascended the throne, and we in the States know him as Mad King George. Similar to the Erdig portrait, Cato's status within the household was so important that he must be included on this portrait of hunting celebrities of that time. So this is a cutout. This is from the Morley Peg. The contemporary reports claim that Cato's hunting horn playing was exceptional and his concert horn playing was exceptional. And he did perform in both capacities. So he not only represents musicians of African descent, but he represents that generation of horn players who were working as both huntsman hornists and concert hornists. So we know that there were hunting horn players in the American colonies by the mid-1700s. And they also served these dual functions. They were enlisted as domestic servants, indentured servants, and enslaved persons. People who could play the horn, enslaved and indentured people who could play the horn, as well as the fiddle and the flute, were in very high demand because social dancing was the huge pastime. And we can see the horn up, yeah, thanks. We can see the horn up there. So horn teachers in the colonies were advertised in newspapers as early as 1736. If you go to the next, thank you. In many states, there were laws against the education of people of African descent, or just people of color. And some profiteers would provide their enslaved servants training in a trade, like playing an instrument. A glance through colonial era newspapers shows that many enslaved people did play the horn. We really can't know how enslaved people and domestic servants felt about their forced status as musicians. The accounts of the day would want you to think that they enjoyed their elevated status, but that is certainly within a power structure that we can't really speak to on a firsthand basis. So we can look to the written accounts of enslaved people who played the horn. Next one. So Olaudah Equiano's interesting narrative of the life of Olaudah Equiano chronicles his abduction, his travels across Africa through the Middle Passage, and then to Barbados, Virginia, and London. His purchaser in Virginia wanted him to learn to play the French horn, but then he was called to duty to fight in the French and Indian War, and Equiano accompanied him. He was sold many times and was eventually able to purchase his freedom and move to London, where he learned to play the horn of his own accord. He was never forced or coerced into performance. And in his narrative, he wrote with passion about his horn playing, and it seemed he was genuinely skilled. He took lessons from a neighbor. Judging from the dates and the location of his neighborhood, it may have been William Salkeld of Covent Garden and Westminster Abbey. His 1789 narrative is widely considered to be the first published slave narrative, and it sparked a new and extremely important literary genre. But in 1785, John Merritt published an account of his life that he had given as a sermon. Interestingly enough, John Merritt was another very highly accomplished horn player. He's most well known as one of the first African American preachers, but as a young person, he was a professional horn and fiddle player in Charleston, South Carolina. He was born as a free person in New York and moved to South Carolina when he was around 10. Because they were free, because his family was free, he was able to take lessons. His mother was able to pay for him to take music lessons. By the time he was 13, John Merritt was gainfully employed as an indentured servant musician. So that means that he was conscripted by a person who purchased his indenture. So he did not have power to refuse the work that he was given. And that meant that sometimes he was performing illegally, and sometimes legally, and sometimes illegally. The South Carolina Negro Act of 1740 made it illegal for groups of enslaved people to gather, learn to write, own property, or grow food. So in South Carolina, Merritt was allowed to perform, but only with white musicians. He didn't have power over the contracts that he was assigned. So if his indenture required him to perform with people of color, he was being contracted to break the law and could not refuse if he wanted to keep his work, and if he didn't want to get punished. So even though he was free, his skill on the horn and the fiddle was being exploited with people by people with power over his livelihood. He's most well known for his first experience with religion when he entered a church intending to disrupt the sermon by blowing loudly on his French horn as a prank. He writes in his narrative that he was struck down by the Lord before he could blow a note. After this experience, John Merritt dedicated himself to the church and quit music until the start of the American Revolution. And during the war, he served as a musician for the British Army, not the Colonial Army. He's not the only Black American to have served on the British side. It was common until George Washington agreed that any enslaved person who enlisted for the Continental Army would be given freedom. So horn players were used in military music in the British and American armies, in bands of harmony music, as well as in signaling capacities. We can see an advertisement for a concert here, which features performances by the horn players in 1783. And next one. I think it's pretty likely that American huntsmen were given signaling duties during the war on bugles as well as on hunting horns. This painting is purported to depict a person of African descent blowing a horn at the preparations for the Battle of Germantown. William Lee was one of George Washington's enslaved servants, and he was also his huntsman. And during the war, he served as Washington's bodyguard. And he was very likely too busy with those duties to perform signaling duties, but it's certainly possible. Thanks. So, similar to Cato's association with Frederick the Prince of Wales and George III, what little we know about William Lee, it exists because of his affiliation with Washington. So it's important to just take a second and acknowledge that this information reads from a perspective that's disconnected from William Lee's true experience as an enslaved Black American. On many colonial estates, enslaved people, including huntsmen, were not seen as people, but as livestock property. And George Washington is no different, regardless of how we want to paint him in our collective national mind. We know from the purchase records that William Lee was mixed race. According to the legal doctrine of the time, a child who was born to an enslaved woman was born into slavery, regardless of the paternity. So we're not making a huge leap to assume that William Lee was progeny of a sexual assault from a white enslaver upon an enslaved Black woman. His duties extended far beyond those of a typical European huntsman. He was at Washington's side, as I said, before, during, and after the Revolutionary War. He fell into a special category of enslaved person who was allowed to serve in the war from the beginning, and he pretty regularly put himself in harm's way to protect George Washington. The next one. He's included in several paintings, including Leutze's depiction of Washington's crossing the Delaware. Both of the men were accomplished horseback riders and hunters, and the sport of fox hunting is built so that the master of the hunt and the huntsman work in synchrony. The relationship, the fox hunting relationship, built a level of trust between the two men that was very unusual for the time. We can go to the next one. So as the huntsman at Mount Vernon, William Lee played the hunting horn, and Washington had placed purchase orders at least 4 times for horns and was also possibly given a horn by the Marquis de Lafayette. The horn pictured here currently lives at Mount Vernon, and it was made by an 18th century British horn maker named George Henry Rodham Boastell, and it was bequeathed to the estate in 1906 by the family of the doctor who had attended Washington on his deathbed. It's purported that Washington gave the horn to him, and there's no evidence to prove or disprove the claim. We can go to the next thing. But there's no reason to think that Washington himself would have played the horn. We can safely assume that the horns purchased by Washington were intended to be played by William Lee as the huntsman. And I personally believe that this horn is of such high quality, there's ample reason to think that it could have been purchased by George Washington. If you would like more information about the horn itself and the replica made by Richard Serafino, and the next one, sorry, thank you. So you can see Richard Serafino's there. You can check out my article on the horn call from February 2021. Their last fox hunt was in 1785, and I was unable to find evidence to indicate that William Lee ever performed concert music on a horn at Mount Vernon. But so their last hunt was 1785, and Washington's last purchase order was in 1786. So it's possible he was trying to emulate George III and Cato, and that he was trying to help Lee find solace in his retirement in an instrument. It's a stretch, but it's possible. And we'll never know if Lee enjoyed playing the hunting horn, if he had expressed any desire to further that relationship with the horn. Then Washington would have tried to make that happen. Washington had great affection for William Lee, but contrary to some romanticized 20th century stories about the two of them, they were not friends. Their relationship was always marked by that power imbalance of slavery. That being said, William Lee was the only enslaved person to be granted immediate freedom upon Washington's death. Lee died in 1810 and was laid to rest in this unmarked slave grave. Historians now believe that he is definitively buried in that plot. Countless other people were buried there. So had William Lee been born in a northern state, he would not have been born into slavery. And had he been born just 4 decades later, he could have had different opportunities on the horn than as an enslaved huntsman. There's good reason to believe that the black brass band tradition stems from the War of 1812. The 3rd Company of Washington Guards in Philadelphia employed a band under the leadership of Frank Johnson that's thought to have received its training during the War of 1812. Johnson was widely known as a band leader and a bugler, but he was also a horn player, and this portrait shows him with an orchestral Baroque horn that's fitted with crooks. By the time of his death in 1844, the use of the horn in the bands was on the decline because the valve had been invented, and it was so synonymous with harmony music that it was natural for the horn to be categorized with woodwind instruments, not brass instruments. So we can go to the next one. By the time the Civil War broke out in 1861, the horn wasn't being used in bands, and Alan Dodworth actually classified the French horn as the last acceptable tenor range instrument for use in a military band or in a brass band of the time. The northern bands usually had about 16 musicians, and they adhered to Dodworth's instrumentation. Photographs suggest that the southern bands were smaller, some as small as 8 people, but the instrumentation was a lot more varied, so I think we can pretty safely assume that there would have been some hunting horns being used, and possibly some valve horns, but I doubt it. But just like during the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812, enslaved people were conscripted into the Confederate Army as fifers, drummers, and buglers. So we can see these are just 2 extant examples of a fifer drummer and another fifer drummer. So within the Union Army was the United States Colored Troops, and they had their own bands. The bandmasters were white while the musicians were black. It was not always easy for the bands of the USCT to get instruments and music because it was at the discretion of the white commanding officers. Racism impacted their decisions, and none of the surviving documentation lists instruments associated with people in those brigade bands. So it's unknown what the typical instrumentation of the bands looked like. This is one surviving photograph, the only surviving photograph that I was able to find, and it's possible that this one exists because it was highly regarded. It does look like it adheres to Dogwood's instrumentation. So the bands of the USCT were held in high regard by African American and white northern populations. They were really great tools for recruitment, and they showed how a person could be lifted out of slavery into an existence as a musician soldier. After the Civil War, minstrel bands emerged as an employment opportunity for musicians who'd been given training during the war. We can go to the next one. And this is a bugler between Buffalo Soldiers, would have been between World War I and the Civil War. We can go to the next. So minstrelsy began in the 1830s and was the most popular form of entertainment in the 19th century and into the 20th century, actually well into the 20th century, across both the South and the North. After the Civil War, minstrelsy provided employment for hundreds, thousands of postbellum entertainers, both black and white, who gained skill, musical skill during the war. But the latent message of minstrel bands is extremely problematic. Quote, coon songs featured catchy tunes about caricatures of Black life that depicted Black people in negative ways. These songs reinforced existing stereotypes of minstrel characters called Zip Coon and Jumping Jim Crow. By the time a person was old enough to have developed their critical thinking skills, these stereotypes were so deeply ingrained, the average listener didn't process those latent messages in the words of the music. And post-Reconstruction Americans used minstrel music to repeat these tropes over and over until they actually served to help justify Jim Crow segregation. Horn players were prevalent in minstrel show bands, circus annex bands, and vaudeville shows, both black and white. Some names have survived through various records, but they don't usually indicate race. So although I've been able to find a lot of photographs, I haven't been able to find names to put to the men in these photographs. Were there women horn players? I'm gonna get to that at the end. So if we go to the next one. So, yep, this is another band, and we can see the horn player in the back row next to the sousaphone. Yep, and then in the next slide, in the very top row, so this is a minstrel band in blackface. This is a white band in blackface. On the very top row on the stage, yep, right there. That's a white horn player in blackface playing the horn in a minstrel band. So another really popular form of entertainment at this turn of the 20th century were orphanage bands. This was seen as a way to provide skills to children and to make money for the orphanage organization. You can see Louis Armstrong at the very top. He's got his arm like this, and Louis Armstrong's not a horn player, but obviously important musical figure in this orphanage band. So the turn of the 20th century, several African-American music schools and orchestras were founded, notably in Washington, D.C., New York, New Orleans, Philadelphia, and Chicago. And the most famous African-American orchestra was the Clef Club Orchestra in New York City, directed by Jim Rees-Europe. And they started performing in 1910, and they used traditional African-American instruments alongside European orchestral instruments. And they only performed music written by Black composers. They typically used baritone horns instead of French horns, but when Jim Europe became a bandmaster for the Army, he knew of horn players to call on to join his band. So it's pretty likely that the Clef Club Orchestra used horn players, they just weren't full-time members of the group. Okay. So when the United States entered World War I in 1917, the military was still segregated into white and non-white units. More than 200,000 American men of color served in the armed forces, and each of these units maintained their own bands, with men from their band as bandmasters as opposed to a white bandmaster. Of all these bands, the 369th Hellfighters was unarguably the most famous. They traveled all across France and had packed audiences. They would have to move concerts outside because they were so popular. We go to the Italian band. Yeah, that's fifers and drummers. Yep. Okay, the next one. Okay, so music was a really effective tool for propaganda and patriotism during World War I. The emphasis of music in the broader culture was maintained through World War II, and it led directly to improved instrumental and choral, just music education in schools. Unfortunately, orchestras didn't allow non-white members, or they didn't extend them invitations to audition. So students of color who wanted to pursue classical music that they were receiving training on were forced to innovate or pursue other career paths. The first few men to break the orchestral color barrier were conductors and string players, and this is Henry Lewis, who joined the bass section of the Los Angeles Philharmonic in 1948. Bob Watt won the audition for assistant principal horn of the LA Phil in 1970, which is 22 years after Henry Lewis. And that made him the first man of color to hold a contracted position in a major American symphony orchestra. Just as a point of reference, the Chicago Symphony didn't hire their first African-American member on any instrument until 2002. So the early and mid-20th century saw classically trained musicians having to create opportunities for themselves in jazz ensembles. And horn players like Julius Watkins and Willie Ruff forged paths for themselves in the face of racism. Julius Watkins pioneered jazz horn playing because it was the only avenue available to him. He was trained classically from the principal horn of the Detroit Symphony, and fell in love with the sound of the horn. If you listen to recordings of Julius Watkins in larger ensembles and of his improvised solos and small combos, it is just so very clear that he was a horn player on par with the best orchestral and solo players of his generation. Patrick Smith has written a fantastic biography of Julius Watkins that I would highly recommend. It's called Chronicle of the Phantom, if you would like to explore more about Julius Watkins. Willie Ruff he's still alive. He lives in Alabama, and he's about 10 years younger than what Watkins would be if he were still alive today. Willie Ruff was one of my professors at Yale, along with Bill Purvis, who was here at KBHC last week. Willie Ruff was inspired to be a musician by W.C. Handy, who had visited his elementary school. W.C. Handy was a very famous vaudeville musician. Willie Ruff's favorite memory of music as a child were the traveling carnival and minstrel bands that came through town. So that shows how deeply entrenched in the social fabric these minstrel bands were. Willie Ruff's autobiography, A Call to Assembly, is the very first book that I recommend to any horn players just wanting to read an autobiography of a horn player, period. And then it also, it shows the firsthand experience of an American musician of color. But outside the color barrier, it's just an incredible book, and it's very well written, and his life story is captivating, and his contributions to our greater musical world and our horn world are extensive. So if there's one thing you take away from this presentation, I recommend that it would be to learn more about Willie Ruff and to read his book. So Bob Watt is about 10 years younger than Willie Ruff. He's also still alive. As with any trailblazer who's the first in their respective path, he experienced hostility and resistance in the workplace. The racism that he experienced took the form of microaggressions with well-intentioned but ignorant people, all the gamut from microaggressions to blatant aggression, blatant racist behavior. And he also wrote an autobiography. It's called The Black Horn, and it goes into detail about his experiences, and he doesn't shy away from the details. So he made the horn a visible instrument to African American communities, and he unlocked the door for horn players like Jerome Ashby. Mr. Ashby is the next So Mr. Ashby served as the associate principal horn of the New York Phil from 1979 until his death from prostate cancer in 2007. And I think Jesse worked with him in school. And he is still highly respected. His legacy endures through, hundreds and hundreds of horn players. His pedagogy was based in hard work, grit, and never accepting less than what was your best at that moment. He emphasized an even, rich sound and the idea that everything was in service to the music. His experience inspired his own peers as well as younger generations of horn players of color to hold themselves to the highest standards of excellence. His lifelong friend, Marshall Seeley, said that other Black horn players took greater pride in themselves because of Jerome, that we now stand on the shoulders of Jerome Ashby. So Bob Watt's retirement and Jerome Ashby's death mark the end of the first generation of African-American horn players allowed to be in symphony orchestras. The future is bright with horn players of all races and genders, due in very large part to the efforts of the people I've documented. Thank you, yeah, that's great. But there were a lot of horn players who suffered racism and sexism in silence. And as was pointed out, there wasn't a single woman on my list. And certainly Nicole Cash is of the one generation younger than Mr. Ashby. But we can't assume that Nicole Cash is the first woman of color to play the French horn. And in my research, I was able to find photographs going back to the 1960s. But before the civil rights movement, I wasn't able to find any photographic evidence. But certainly when you look at the history of women who play the horn, other than Beata Picorni, we don't see women in the history of horn playing other than Beata Picorni, before the World War II, really. And that was just because women were filling in the seats of men who were going off to fight in the war. They were filling in the seats in the orchestra. Ethel Merker, Helen Cotis being the two big examples that are most often used, but they were both white women. So at least in my research, which is certainly thorough, but not, it is not everything. And it only covers the US. So what happened in other countries, there may be documentation of women of color playing horn before the 1950s, 1960s. I haven't uncovered that yet, but I would like to if you have any paths that you can direct me on. The whitewashing of history is not unique to our instrument. I really want to emphasize that this is not meant to make us feel bad about the history of our instrument. It's not just a horn. And that's not to say that only white people were playing the horn, because as we've seen, they weren't. It's just that the people in power were the people who were documenting what was happening in history, and they were prone to document their version of history. And that's not just in horn, not just in music, that's just what's happened across the Common Era, across documented history, not just the Common Era, but before. So yes, so my goal today was to redress the anonymity of some horn players of color who suffered racism in silence. And if there are questions, I'd be really happy to take them.
Well, you guys think of questions for Katy. I
just have one question for you that I kind of was thinking about as you were presenting this. How did you find this? What kind of resources were you using to find this information?
Yeah. So before I started teaching at the University of Iowa, I was teaching at the University of Virginia. I was there in 2017 when the mob came with the tiki torches and the white supremacist rally that murdered a young woman in town, and that's kind of what sparked me to look for something. I just started Googling. So Thomas Jefferson had founded UVA, which was where I was teaching. And I just Googled Thomas Jefferson French horn, just, one of those 3 a.m. Google searches. And I found this letter that Thomas Jefferson had written to a baron, I think it was a baron an Italian baron who was living in Paris, who had asked him if he could help facilitate finding some servant horn players to come to Monticello. Like, what? Oh my gosh. Okay. So then I was like, okay, if Thomas Jefferson was doing that, I wonder if any other founding fathers were. And then just the Google George Washington horn players. And then I found this, I found out about William Lee. And William Lee was really my entry point. So because I was living in Virginia at the time, I could make the 1.5-hour drive up to Mount Vernon. So I was able to spend real hands-on time with that instrument and with the curators and the people who run that estate. And like I said, that was that entry point. So then it was several years of just contacting museums and reading dissertation after dissertation, reading every historical horn book, rereading Fitzpatrick and Morley Peg how many times. But yeah, I mean, it really was just getting in the weeds, and I needed to educate myself about race in America. That was honestly the most time-consuming bulk of the research, was just making sure that I understood how to place the horn in the context of history, because I needed to understand the history. So yeah, I don't think that I have necessarily uncovered anyone who has not already been documented. I just put everything together, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of feels like we're looking at like thousands and thousands of hours of research and reading condensed into about 40 minutes, I think. It's very, very impressive research. I'm really happy to have learned all that stuff. Heidi, you asked about putting the slideshow in the drive so we can have a closer look at the photos. Just for the sake of having it on record, Katie, would that be okay with you to share the slideshow
on Drive? Yes, I just need to make sure that I have everything properly documented with the right citations, but yes, I would say maybe give me another week after camp ends, but I'm absolutely fine with that. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, and there's another question. Toby Sisson said, looks like vaudeville ballad horns / mellophones. So yeah, what do you consider horns only to be the circular kind, or does it have to do with?
Well, so it's funny because some of the in the Library of Congress, they had some photographs cataloged with, like, saying French horn, but they were actually what are called circular bugles. So I think that I did include one just because it looks like I know exactly which one you're talking about. It is a circular bugle. I think it's in G. I can't remember. I think it's pitched in G, not in F. But it's not a trumpet. It's not a bugle. It's not a French horn. But it served the same function. So I thought it was important to include. But yeah, thanks. Really good question.
Yeah, are there any other people or researchers kind of discussing, I don't know, music history or music theory from a sort of racial background point of view?
Oh yeah, I mean that's the big thing in academia right now, is how to make music history and music theory less Eurocentric and really make it inclusive, because it's just like I was saying, like we've whitewashed a lot of things, and that's not to take away the importance of what European and Eurocentric music has brought to the table. Certainly our instrument, it shines in Eurocentric music, but there are a lot more non-European people on this planet than there are European people, and if we really want to be inclusive, then it's important to start or continue that research. So I don't know that I can speak to it beyond that. Yeah.
I know there is a great resource. I was having a conversation with Bernard actually last week sometime, and he introduced me to a music theorist who I had never heard of before, named Philip Ewell.
Oh,
who
Ewell?
Ewell. Here, I'll send his website in the chat here. He is a music professor at Hunter College of City University of New York, so SUNY Hunter College, and he has a whole series of things confronting exactly what you're talking about, where there is definitely Eurocentric music theory, but there's also a wide variety of other things that exist in the world that can really open your eyes and your ears to the wide variety of music. I'd really recommend checking out Philip Ewell.
Yeah, and more universities across the South are starting to hire professors of hip hop, which I know at UVA we had an amazing professor of hip hop, but at Iowa we don't yet. But I mean, just incorporating more genres. Yeah, Philip Ewell, I've definitely heard of him.
Yeah, there's also a great YouTube. I think, who is it? Adam Neely. He does a lot of different kinds of things, but he goes into a deep dive on the history of music theory from a racial perspective. It's a really interesting video. It's kind of long. I think it's about 45 minutes, but it's full of really interesting information.
Yeah.
Speaking of hip hop, there's a lot of complexities in hip hop that I don't think a lot of us in classical music realm really identify with. But I can't remember exactly what it was. I think there's a Netflix series that talks about hip hop that's really interesting.
Yeah. As far as the history of quote Black music, I mean, Eileen Southern is that's the place to start. Her, she should have been the first person I said, but she was. She exemplifies women in academia, and she exemplifies African Americans in academia, and just how constantly having to be better than everyone else. She taught at Harvard for a very, very long time and passed away recently, but she literally wrote the book. That's like the first place that I would start. I mean, I owe so much of my research to her. I could not have done this without
her work. It looks like Harvard did it's called the Eileen Southern Initiative.
Yeah, I was part of. Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
You were part of this.
Well, I was a participant.
You were a participant. I see.
Yeah.
Drop that link in the chat.
Yeah.
I've never heard of her before.
Yep. I mean, she, arguably is as important as what's our big grout, like our Grout Paliska and our Aldwell Schachter and all our textbooks.
Are there any other questions?
Oh, Shanice. She's Shanice. A great horn player. She is. Man, and she writes some very cool music too. I just bought one of her pieces that I need to start exploring. Yeah, Shanice is a perfect example of someone who fell in love with the instrument and is just like doing it her way. And man, she's just a sick player. She's so good. She is.
She sounds amazing. Fantastic.
Yeah. She's on Instagram, she's on Facebook. I think does she have a SoundCloud? I can't remember. But yeah, Shanice is great.
Lovely. Are there any other questions in the chat for Katy while we're getting ready to wrap up here? We try to give all of our participants here a 10-minute leeway to make it to their next class on time.
So I was just speaking about Bradley, the curator at the Met. I was just speaking with one of our participants about her yesterday. So yeah, she's on my list of people to contact. Thank you, Heidi.
Cool. It doesn't look like there's any other questions in the chat, so I suppose I'll go ahead and wrap it up today. Did you have anything else you wanted to say, Katie?
No, just thank you for the
Yeah, and thank you so much, and thank you guys all for attending and watching on YouTube. It's our pleasure. So glad you decided to spend your time with us. If you have any questions or you want to find any more information, you can find all of our things on various social sites. Just search for us, Kendall Betts Horn Camp. Our website is horncamp.org. You'll find any information you could possibly desire about us there. Please join us tomorrow for another Horn Camp Connect. This one will be led by Bernard Scully, and the faculty member featured in the second half will be Dr. Lauren Becker. Thank you all so much for attending this morning, and we hope you have a lovely day.